I recently got a custom order, and for that I had to embroider a name onto the felt. What I usually do is I write that on the felt using a fabric marking pen and then embroider it. But this time it was a brand name with a specific font, and it means it has to be exactly the same as the print. Believe it or not, I have never used stick and stitch paper for my felt crafts. The reason was simply I didn't need it. If you checked out my Etsy shop, you know mine usually has simple embroidery work. So with this custom order, I had to decide either buy some stick and stitch papers or find an alternative for that. I found an alternative, and let me show you what I did to transfer letters onto felt. First, print out the name onto a regular A4 sheet. Next, I'm gonna trace that onto a tissue paper. For that, place a reasonably sized tissue paper on top of the A4 sheet, and as you can see, you can clearly see the letters through it. Now simply trace that onto the tissue paper using a pencil. You can use tape or simply hold the tissue paper to keep it in place. Otherwise, the design won't be identical to the original print. One more thing, don't force the pencil too much when you are tracing. As we all know, tissue paper is delicate and we don't want to tear it apart yet. After tracing the entire thing, next get ready all the materials and tools including felt and embroidery supplies. You'll need an embroidery hoop, embroidery thread, a hand needle, a pair of scissors, tape, and finally piece of felt in your color of choice. Whenever you are doing heavy embroidery on felt, it's better if you can use wool felt because of its thickness and durability. I do have some wool felt, but my always go-to is craft felt. Those are the ones you find in almost any craft store. But the problem is, will it survive heavy embroidery work? In that case, I have a solution, and it's double layering that specific area of the felt. Let me show you how. Now, if you are using wool felt, you can skip this next part completely. After setting the felt into your embroidery hoop, decide which area you're going to embroider the name and how much of an area that will cover. You just need to get a rough idea, so take the tissue paper with the letter design and make a rough guess. Now according to that, cut a piece of felt that is large enough to cover the area with the design. You can choose the same color felt or different color felt piece for that. It goes on the back, so it really doesn't matter. Now remember, this is only if you are not using any wool felt. We do this to create a double layer which eventually helps to survive the heavy embroidery work. Next, turn over to the back of the embroidery hoop and place that additional felt piece on the back, covering the area that we are planning to do the embroidery design on the front. Now thread your needle and make a knot at the end. We are going to stitch the small felt piece to the main felt using the running stitch. The running stitch is a basic hand sewing stitch, and here I'm using it as a temporary stitch. So make longer stitch lengths, just enough to keep the two pieces together. We'll get rid of these stitches at the end anyway. I did double layering because this is craft felt. But I have seen some people even double layer usual fabrics like cotton or linen whenever they do embroidery. I think it's for the same reasons, to give an extra stability. Feel free to share your thoughts and experience on that too. Now I have mentioned wool felt and craft felt several times. If you feel confused, I recommend you watch the video I did about different kinds of felt. I think you will get answers to many felt related questions there. Finally, make a couple of knots to securely end the stitch. After dealing the problem with craft felt, now let's move on to transferring the letters. Turn over to the right side of the felt, and next we need to trim off the tissue paper to a reasonable size. For that, take the tissue paper with the trace design and start to trim it off in all four sides. Make sure you have enough space around, so we can either pin it or tape it to the felt next. After that, place the tissue paper on top of the felt. If you double layered the felt like I did, make sure you place the trace name on that specific area. Those running stitches are a guide for that. Now use a few pins or tape to hold the tissue paper in place. Also make sure it's properly stretched. Next, thread your needle and make a knot at the end. For this part, don't use more than 2 thread counts. Then simply start to outline the traced name using the back stitch. Don't make the stitches too tight and the stitch lengths too short. We only want the name to be outlined for this part. Later you'll understand why we did that. Now if you don't know how to do the back stitch or even the running stitch we did earlier, don't worry, we have all those basic stitch tutorials on our channel. Please make sure to check those out. I think this way of transferring patterns onto felt works just fine with letters and even with simple embroidery designs. I'm sure there are many other methods, but this is the best I could come up with what I had in hand. After you outline all the letters, turn over to the other side and make a knot to secure the stitches. For that, go underneath the last stitch and pull it to form a loop. Then go through the loop and pull it all the way to make a tight knot. You can make a second knot for a more secure stitch. Finally, trim off the thread and now turn over to the right side. Now it's time to slowly and carefully tear off the tissue paper. For that, first get rid of the pins and tapes you used to keep the paper in place. You can then tear off the outer parts of the tissue paper with your hands or use a pair of scissors to trim off that area. Be careful not to damage any of the stitches while you are doing so. After that, tear off all the remaining tissue parts as well. Actually, I did the same thing with an A4 sheet instead of a tissue paper first. I told you I experimented with alternatives. But the A4 sheet was too thick and it made things a lot harder to tear off at the end. You can use a toothpick to pick up small pieces trapped in between the stitches. This is actually easier than it looks. Just be gentle and it'll come off easily. After removing all the tissue pieces, you can now fill these letters with any filling stitch you prefer. I'm gonna go with the satin stitch. As you now have the outline, it'll be regular hand embroidery work. For this particular one, I'm using a combination of off-white and red embroidery thread, 2 from each, so it's a total of 4 thread counts. When filling an outline design, I go from one outside edge to the other outside edge. That means filling will cover the outlining. After you are done filling the letters, turn over to the wrong side and make a couple of knots to secure the stitch. Finally, trim the thread short, and if you didn't double layer like I did, you are all good at this point. But for me, next I need to get rid of these running stitches. For that, snip it in a few places and pull it to get rid of all the stitches. For that, I'm gonna turn over to the wrong side because that's where the knots are. Then it'll be easier to pull it off. Running stitch is used as a temporary stitch in many occasions, especially with altering garments, and it's a very useful stitch to learn. At this point, we are at the final step, and next carefully trim off the excess area on the additional felt piece we use for double layering. Use a small pair of scissors and make sure you are not damaging any of the stitches. Try to trim off as much as you can all around the felt piece. As I mentioned in the very beginning, I had to go through this learning curve because of a custom order. If you have a small business, you know custom orders are a great way to challenge yourself in learning new skills. The best part is that this YouTube channel now gives me a chance to share what I have learned with you as well. You're welcome to share your experience with us too, and if you would like to know what I think of custom orders, please check out that video next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll join you in the next one.